And the story of Stone Soup is one of hope. It's one of community building. And it's so important in these days to remind us of our role in making Stone Soup. We may not be able to provide soup for an entire village, but we can certainly add a few carrots, bring an onion, add a little bit of stock. And of course, we have to remember the people who will bring the brownies and the chocolate chip cookies too. Can't have a good meal without brownies and chocolate chip cookies. So when we look around our culture today, it seems to me that we are living in increasingly angry times. Does it feel like that to you? Does it feel like we're getting angry and angrier, meaner and meaner, sadder and sadder, that we are upset more easily about things that go on? It doesn't take much time to watch the news or to look at the internet or to talk to neighbors and family and get a sense that people have a quicker anger trigger than maybe we used to years ago. There's actually some interesting research that supports this. There's an organization called the World Happiness Group, and they've used research to determine what makes people happy. People who report being happy, they have determined some of the ingredients of happiness, and then they do research all around the world and determine which countries are happiest, and they rank them every year. 10 years ago, America was 7th of the 200-something countries in the world when it comes to happiness. 7th. 2016, at the end of the year when this report was published, the United States now ranks 19th in world happiness. Countries that are happier than the United States include Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, Finland, the Netherlands, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Sweden, Israel, Costa Rica, Austria, Ireland, Germany, Belgium, and Luxembourg. All of the top countries rank highly on the main ingredients that research has found to lead to happiness. Ingredients such as caring for others, a sense of freedom, generous giving, honesty, health, good income and good governance, long life expectancy, having someone to count on in times of trouble, and trust in businesses. If we take a look at some of these ingredients, I'd like for you to consider the main factors and which of these are inward focused and which of these are outward focused. Caring for others, that's outward focused, outside of ourselves. Personal freedom is an inward focus. Both are important. Generosity, giving to others in need, that's outward focused. Honesty, that's both integrity for ourselves and expecting integrity and getting integrity from others. So that's both inward and outward. Good health, being in good health, that's a personal, that's an inward thing. Having a good income is inward. Good governance is an outward focused thing, but having the confidence in your government to do a good job. Having someone to count on in times of trouble. Being able to know that you can go to a neighbor or family or friend, pick up the phone and say, I need help, and have someone respond in a non-judgmental, positive way. Trust in business. Being able to have a business community that you can trust to make the right decisions. Don't want to bring up trickle-down economics with that. So there are 2 of these that are mainly outward focused, surprisingly. Caring for others and generosity. 4 that are primarily inward focused. Personal freedom, good health, good income, someone to count on. And 3 that are to a degree both. I know that we have grown up with our parents telling us we need to focus on others and not be so selfish, but there's a time when it's okay, in order to be happy, to focus on ourselves as well. This is why I believe we are living in an increasing angrier and angrier time. If we think about events that are happening locally, in our region, in our state, in our nation, and in the world, We have a lot of things to be concerned about, some things that might make us angry. Locally, we have one of the worst opioid epidemics in the nation here in Palm Beach County. Every week, we hear multiple reports of gun violence in the community. Lots of shootings. In fact, on Friday, just up at Gardens Mall, there was a shooting 3 miles from here, in a place that most of us would assume to be safe, in the middle of the afternoon, in the parking lot at the mall. The water quality from agricultural runoff and how that's affecting the algae growth in our streams and eventually our water supply. Homelessness, voting rights, community police relations, national anthem and flag protests, which of course aren't about the national anthem or the flag. Immigrant issues, including DACA and Dreamers, mass shootings, religious extremism, related violence, white supremacy, free speech restrictions, Trump, sexual harassment and assault stories, environmental concerns, on and on and on and on the list can go. So why do we get outraged? Why do these things upset us? If we are a caring human being, the empathy that we feel for those who are victims of these, even for ourselves, is real and true. Sometimes this comes as a result of the family that we've grown up in, the community that communicates values to us. Sometimes it's something that's simply inward. It's innate in us. I have a daughter, Kaylee. She's 26 now, but when she was in 3rd grade, we got a sense of just how much of this empathy she had for others. She had a friend who didn't have any other friends in class. Kaylee, from a very early age, always befriended the marginalized, those who sat by themselves. This friend was named Sierra, and a couple weeks before Christmas break, as the class was planning their holiday party, the teacher let everybody know that they had to have everything in order to participate in the holiday party, including returning all of their library books or paying fines if they couldn't find a book. Well, Sierra had a book that she had had since September and she couldn't find it. She had an overdue library book and an increasing amount in fine. Sierra came from a family that was going through a lot of difficulty. She lived with her grandmother. Her father was not in the picture. Nobody knew where he was. Her mother was serving jail time for drug-related issues. She had a much older sister who was pregnant and in and out of drugs herself. So she lived with her mother in a very old, rundown house that I had taken to Kaylee to visit and to play at a couple of times. And so Kaylee knew that Sierra had no way to get the money to pay the fine, and she had a very strong moral sense that it was not inherently fair that Sierra be cut out of the holiday party because her family didn't have money to pay a damn overdue library fine. So Kaylee went around to all of the other kids in 3rd grade and asked them to give a penny or a dime or a nickel so that they could pay Sierra's library fine. That's the kind of empathy and caring that leads us to want to make a difference in the world. That's the kind of situation that we talk about when we have righteous indignation. In that moment, for her friend Sierra, Kaylee had righteous indignation at the inherent unfairness of this stupid school policy that unfairly punished those from poor and disadvantaged backgrounds. I don't know how you teach an 8-year-old something like that, because it's not something I remember doing purposely, but it's something that Kaylee felt so strongly inside that she had to act on. Yes, we can teach each other that. We can teach our children this by example, by being involved ourselves, by encouraging them to be involved and to help others. Some of us have this as a natural part of who we are. For Kaylee, she feels that very strongly for other people. When she went to college, naturally she decided to major in social work so she could spend her life helping others. Towards the end of October, her very first semester, she was taking an intro to sociology class. She called me on the phone. She was playing soccer at Huntington University in Indiana. I was teaching in Arkansas. She called me one afternoon in tears. "Kaylee, what's going on, honey?" "Daddy, I can't do this. I can't go to class every day and read these books, chapter after chapter. Hearing what's happening in the world, I can't handle it emotionally. There's too much pain." I didn't teach her that. Some of us have the opportunity, the challenge to know what's going on with us inside of ourselves. When we feel slighted, when we feel threatened, that is often a legitimate feeling that we need to do something about as well. If that's the intrinsic motivator that gets you to move on behalf of others so that you can benefit as well, there's nothing wrong with that. We are, in fact, getting angrier and grumpier, and we're having more and more issues that we have to deal with. There are differences and there are similarities in the things that upset us when we look at external issues and internal issues. Many of these bring us to the point of righteous indignation. Righteous indignation is simply the idea that my anger is justified based on a sense of moral justice. That can be injustice regarding others, regarding self, or regarding culture. It is not the same thing as righteous or self-righteous indignation, which is mostly about our own ego, our own pride, our own sense of people not paying enough attention to us. It's not the same thing, and it can be difficult to distinguish between those two. But if you have a sense sometimes that my outrage is better or more important than your outrage, then I would encourage you to take a self-examination of what it is that truly outrages you. For the past year and a couple weeks or so, we've been dealing with the election of a new president. Many of his past, current, and intended actions draw a lot of outrage. Many of us have participated in conversations with family, with friends, and through social media. We participated in protests or demonstrations to let our feelings be known. I've never really been one to be all that politically active. I'm kind of a political nerd. I like watching the news. Since I've been in high school, I've followed elections. This was something that was instilled in me by one of my grandmothers. I remember when I would have been, 11, 12 years old, the year that Watergate was going on and President Nixon eventually resigned. My grandmother would call my mom and say, "Let Danny know that there's history being made on the TV right now." And if I was outside playing, if I was in my room doing something, no matter what I was doing, she would tell my mom to make me stop and watch the news because history's being made. And I had learned, because of her interest, to be interested in politics and what was happening and how that was affecting the world. And so, for many of us, whenever we see someone now elected as the most powerful person in the world, who has questionable moral judgment, who has a seeming lack of care for many of the things that our progressive liberal causes care about, and destroying and repealing many of the laws and the acts that have come before him because he's trying to make a name for himself, that creates a sense of moral outrage. So what is really worth our righteous indignation? What is worth the time and energy that we spend in order to try to make a difference when we feel like this? What motivates us to get off of our duffs and really do something? It depends on the individual. I don't think it's fair to expect every single person to be outraged by the same thing. There are roughly 85 or 90 of us here today. If we went around and I asked everybody to share what it is that outrages you the most, we would very likely get 80 or 90 different answers. And that's perfectly okay, because we are each motivated by something very deep within us. Sometimes that's something that we don't even recognize or can't explain. What we do know is that Unitarian Universalists have a long, long history of activism. We have forefathers and contemporaries who have been very involved in making a difference from the earliest days of anti-slavery, women's suffrage, as we know, the civil rights movement, into peace and other social justice issues, women's issues. Black Lives Matter currently is something that many of us are involved with. We're hosting the Palm Beach County Black Lives Matter group here on this campus when they meet. White supremacy, we know that we had many of our members and our UU ministers march against white supremacy over the past couple of months. There are many things that motivate us. In my own experience, while I haven't tended to be involved in those large community events, Tess and I have participated a couple of times in marches and protests here since Trump became president. And we were participating in one about a year ago where there were thousands of people who gathered downtown by Trump Tower and then walked or tried to walk all the way to Mar-a-Lago. That was a very powerful event to see the different people, the mix of backgrounds, the signs, the motivations that brought people there. But also in my life, I've been motivated by other intensely personal issues. Many years ago, I had a chance to go to Ukraine and to teach for a couple of weeks. And there were missionaries there that I got to know who wanted to take me to an orphanage in northern Ukraine. This would have been in the mid-90s. So not long after the fall of the Soviet Union and Ukraine became a former Soviet nation, independent, trying to make it on its own. The airport we flew into was like flying into something from the 20s or 30s. Every color was gray or a dingy green. Things were broken. There wasn't electricity in many places. And as we went to visit this orphanage, it really did take you back to a century earlier.